Hi, I'm Zoe. Last Sunday, my father looked me straight in the eye across our dining room table and said the words that still echo in my head. You're an embarrassment to this family, and frankly, we're tired of pretending otherwise. My mother nodded. My siblings stayed silent. 20 minutes later, Mayor Patricia Fleming was standing in our doorway, holding a crystal award with my name engraved on it. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The Sunday dinner tradition at the Hartwell house was sacred, or so my mother Linda always claimed. Every week at exactly 6:30, we'd gather around the mahogany table that had been in our family for 3 generations. The one that dominated our formal dining room with its pristine cream walls and carefully arranged family portraits. The chandelier cast a warm glow over the bone china that only came out for these occasions, and the smell of Linda's famous pot roast would fill the house from the moment you walked through the front door. But sacred traditions have a way of becoming prisons when you're the one person who doesn't quite fit the mold everyone else seems to slip into so effortlessly. I sat in my usual spot, the chair closest to the kitchen door, picking at my mashed potatoes while my sister Brooke regaled everyone with tales from her latest real estate conquest. At 26, she was already the top seller at Hartwell Real Estate, our father Richard's company that had been the cornerstone of our family's reputation in Riverside Heights for over 2 decades. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled in loose waves, her navy blazer still crisp despite it being Sunday evening, and her engagement ring caught the light every time she gestured. The Kowalski property closed for $50,000 over, asking, she announced, cutting her roast with surgical precision. I told them the market was hot, but even I didn't expect that kind of bidding war. Richard beamed with pride, his chest puffing out like a peacock. That's my girl. Natural-born saleswoman, just like her old man. My younger brother Tyler, 22 and fresh out of college with a business degree he'd used to eventually join the family company, raised his wine glass. To Brooke, future owner of half of Riverside Heights. Everyone laughed except me. Not because I wasn't proud of Brooke, but because these moments always felt like watching a movie where everyone knew their lines except me. I'd graduated with a degree in English literature 2 years ago, much to Richard's visible disappointment, and had been working part-time at the Riverside Public Library while trying to figure out my next move. In a family of natural-born entrepreneurs, I was the anomaly who preferred books to balance sheets. So Zoe, Linda said, her voice carrying that particular tone mothers use when they're about to spotlight the family member who's been too quiet. How are things at the library? Still checking out books and organizing shelves? The way she said it made my job sound like a hobby rather than actual work. I swallowed a bite of green beans and tried to keep my voice steady. It's going well. I'm actually working on some new programs to help with adult literacy in the community. Adult literacy? Richard scoffed, not bothering to look up from his plate. Honey, people who want to read learned how in elementary school. You can't force education on people who don't value it. That's not true, Dad. There are so many reasons why adults might struggle with reading. English as a second language. Learning disabilities that went undiagnosed. Poverty that meant they had to work instead of focus on school when they were younger. Zoe, Tyler interrupted with a patronizing smile. You always were the bleeding heart of the family. I felt heat rise in my cheeks but pressed on. I've been volunteering at the community center on Pine Street, and you'd be amazed at how grateful people are for just a little help. Last week, this woman named Maria finally read her first full novel in English. She was so proud she cried. That's nice, Linda said in the tone people use when they want to change the subject. But Richard wasn't ready to let it go. He set down his fork and leaned back in his chair, studying me with the same expression he used when evaluating a property that wasn't worth his time. Zoe, sweetheart, I'm going to be direct with you because that's what families do. This bleeding heart phase of yours needs to end. You're 24 years old, living in your childhood bedroom, working part-time at a library, and spending your free time with people who couldn't be bothered to learn basic skills when they had the chance. My throat felt tight, but I managed to keep my voice level. These people work 2 jobs to support their families. They're trying to better themselves despite circumstances that would have broken most of us. Circumstances, Richard repeated, shaking his head. There's always an excuse, isn't there? Look at this family. Your grandfather built this business from nothing. No excuses, no handouts, just hard work and smart decisions. That's the Hartwell way. Maybe the Hartwell way isn't the only way that matters, I said quietly. The silence that followed was deafening. Linda stopped chewing. Tyler looked genuinely shocked. Brooke raised an eyebrow like she was watching an interesting but ultimately pointless debate. Richard's face darkened. Excuse me? I should have backed down. I should have apologized and changed the subject, like I always did. Instead, something inside me that had been building pressure for months finally found its voice. I said maybe the Hartwell way isn't the only way that matters. Maybe helping people who are struggling isn't a waste of time. Maybe making a difference in someone's life is worth more than closing another real estate deal. Making a difference? Richard's voice rose. Zoe, you live in a fantasy world. Those people you're so concerned about will take your help and give you nothing in return. That's not making a difference, that's enabling. You don't know anything about the people I work with. I know enough. I know they're the reason property values drop in certain neighborhoods. I know they're the reason we have to worry about crime rates and school funding. And I know that my daughter wasting her time playing savior to people who don't want to be saved is an embarrassment to this family. The words hit me like a physical blow. An embarrassment? Richard nodded, his jaw set in the stubborn line I knew so well. Yes, Zoe, an embarrassment. Do you think I enjoy telling my business partners that my daughter works part-time at a library? Do you think it's easy explaining why you're not involved in the family business like your siblings? Do you have any idea how it looks when people ask what you're doing with your life and I have to make up some story about you, finding yourself? Linda reached across the table and placed her hand on his arm. Richard, maybe that's enough. But he shrugged her off. No, Linda, she needs to hear this. We've been walking on eggshells around Zoe for 2 years, hoping she'd grow out of this phase. But it's only getting worse. Now she's arguing with me at my own dinner table about my values, the values that built this house and put food on this table and paid for her college education. I felt like I was drowning in plain sight. My chest was tight, my hands were shaking, and every instinct told me to run upstairs to my room like I had when I was 12, and overwhelmed by the expectations I could never seem to meet. I'm not arguing with your values, I managed to say. I'm trying to explain that mine are different. Different, Richard repeated. Different. Well, let me tell you something about different, Zoe. Different doesn't pay the bills. Different doesn't build a legacy. Different doesn't make a family proud. What you're doing isn't noble, it's naive. And frankly, we're tired of pretending otherwise. There it was. The truth I'd suspected but never wanted to confirm. They weren't proud of me. They weren't even tolerant of me. They were embarrassed by me. I looked around the table, searching for some sign that someone would defend me, that someone would point out how cruel his words were. Tyler was staring at his plate. Linda was fidgeting with her napkin. Brooke was checking her phone. Fine, I whispered, standing up so quickly my chair scraped against the hardwood floor. I get it. Zoe, sit down, Linda said, but there was no real authority behind it. No, I think I've heard enough. I understand where I stand in this family. I walked toward the kitchen, needing to get away from the suffocating weight of their disappointment. Behind me, I heard Richard's voice, calmer now but no less cutting. She'll be back. She always comes back. And maybe next time she'll be ready to have an adult conversation about her future. I was standing at the kitchen sink, gripping the edge of the counter and trying to breathe normally, when the doorbell rang. The sound seemed impossibly loud in the tense quiet that had settled over the house. Who could that be? Linda wondered aloud. We're not expecting anyone. I heard footsteps in the hallway, the sound of the front door opening, and then voices. Official voices. Professional voices that carried the kind of authority that made people straighten their shoulders and clear their throats. Good evening. I'm Mayor Patricia Fleming, and I'm looking for Zoe Hartwell. My heart stopped. Mayor Fleming was here? Looking for me? I pressed myself against the kitchen wall, straining to hear the conversation happening in our foyer. Mayor Fleming. Richard's voice had shifted completely, taking on the smooth, professional tone he used with important clients. What an unexpected honor. I'm Richard Hartwell, Zoe's father. How can we help you? Actually, Mr. Hartwell, I'm here to help you celebrate. Is Zoe available? I have something rather special for her. I heard Linda's heels clicking against the marble foyer floor. She's just in the kitchen. Zoe, could you come here, please? My legs felt like jelly, but somehow I managed to walk from the kitchen through the dining room to the front hallway where my family had gathered around a woman I'd only ever seen in newspaper photos and on local television. Mayor Patricia Fleming was taller than I'd expected, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She wore a navy coat and carried a small leather briefcase. Zoe Hartwell? She asked with a warm smile. Yes, ma'am, I managed to say.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Wonderful. I have been trying to reach you, but I believe your contact information in our system was outdated. I'm here to present you with the city's Outstanding Community Service Award for your exceptional work with the Riverside Adult Literacy Program. The words seemed to float in the air between us. Outstanding Community Service Award. For me. I glanced at my family, and their expressions ranged from confused to stunned. Mayor Fleming continued. Your supervisor at the community center, Eleanor Vance, nominated you 3 months ago. The selection committee was unanimous in their decision. Your dedication to adult education, the innovative techniques you've developed, and the remarkable success rate of your program participants have made a significant impact on our community. She opened her briefcase and withdrew a beautiful crystal award, etched with the city seal and my name. Below that, the inscription read, "In recognition of outstanding dedication to community education and the transformation of lives through literacy." I don't understand, Richard said, his voice strangely strained. Mayor Fleming turned to him with professional politeness. Your daughter has been volunteering 20 hours a week at the Pine Street Community Center for the past 8 months. She's developed a curriculum that combines traditional literacy education with practical life skills, and she's helped over 40 adults achieve functional reading levels. 3 of her students have gone on to earn their GEDs, and 2 have enrolled in community college programs. I stared at the award in her hands, speechless. I'd known my work was meaningful to the people I helped, but I'd never imagined it was being noticed on a city level. But that's not all, the mayor continued. Mrs. Vance tells me that Zoe has been doing this work entirely on her own time, with no expectation of recognition or compensation. She's created partnerships with local businesses to provide job interview preparation, worked with the library to establish a book lending program specifically for adult learners, and even organized family literacy nights so parents can work on reading skills alongside their children. Linda's mouth had fallen open slightly. We didn't know about most of this. She's quite remarkable, Mayor Fleming said, extending the award toward me. The kind of citizen every community hopes to have. Zoe, would you like to say a few words? I took the award with trembling hands. It was heavier than I'd expected, solid and real and beautiful. My name was there in elegant script, proof that someone, somewhere, thought my work mattered. Thank you, I stammered. I never expected anything like this. I just wanted to help. That's exactly what makes you special, the mayor said gently. You saw a need in your community and you filled it, quietly and selflessly. The people you've helped have written letters about you. They've shared stories about how you've changed their lives, given them confidence, opened doors they thought were closed forever. She reached into her briefcase again and pulled out a folder. I'd like to share just one of these letters if you don't mind. It's from a woman named Maria Santos. My breath caught. Maria, who had cried when she finished her first novel in English. Mayor Fleming opened the folder and began to read. Dear Mayor Fleming, I am writing to tell you about an angel named Zoe who changed my life. When I came to America 5 years ago, I could speak English, but I could not read it well. I was ashamed and scared to ask for help. Then I met Zoe at the community center. She did not make me feel stupid or embarrassed. She made me feel brave. She taught me not just words, but confidence. Because of Zoe, I can now read to my children at bedtime. Because of Zoe, I was able to pass the test to become a certified nurse's aide. Because of Zoe, I am not afraid of forms at the doctor's office or parent-teacher conferences at my children's school. She did not just teach me to read better. She taught me that I could learn anything. Please give her an award, because she is a hero to people like me. Tears were streaming down my face before the mayor finished reading. Behind me, I could hear Linda sniffling. "There are 37 more letters just like this one," Mayor Fleming said softly. "From people whose lives you've touched, whose worlds you've opened, whose futures you've brightened. This award isn't just from the city, Zoe. It's from everyone whose life is better because you cared enough to help." I looked at my family, still clustered behind me in the hallway. Richard's face had gone pale. Tyler was staring at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Brooke had put her phone away entirely. "The award ceremony is next Friday evening at City Hall," the mayor continued. "We'd love to have your family there to celebrate with you. This is the highest honor our city bestows on civilian volunteers." Richard stepped forward, and I braced myself for more criticism, more disappointment. Instead, his voice was quiet and strangely uncertain. "Mayor Fleming, we had no idea Zoe was doing work of this magnitude. She never mentioned. We never asked." The mayor smiled diplomatically. "Sometimes our most impactful citizens are also our most humble ones. You should be very proud of her, Mr. Hartwell. What she's accomplished is extraordinary." After the mayor left, we stood in the hallway in awkward silence. The Crystal Award felt warm in my hands, substantial and real, in a way that made everything else feel slightly surreal. 37 letters, 40 adults helped to read, 3 GEDs, 2 college enrollments. Numbers that represented real people, real lives, real changes that mattered in ways my family was only beginning to understand. Linda was the first to speak. "Zoe, honey, why didn't you tell us about all of this?" I looked at her, then at Richard, then at my siblings. How could I explain that I'd tried, in small ways, over and over again? How could I tell them that every time I'd mentioned my work at the community center, they'd changed the subject or dismissed it as a phase? How could I make them understand that their embarrassment in me had been so clear, so consistent, that I'd learned to keep the things I cared about to myself? "I did tell you," I said quietly. "Maybe not everything, but I told you I was working with adult literacy. I told you about Maria. I told you about the programs I was developing." Richard ran his hand through his graying hair. "But you made it sound like volunteer work, like a hobby." "It is volunteer work, Dad. That doesn't make it less important." Brooke stepped forward, and for the first time in months, she looked at me with something approaching respect. "Zoe, this is incredible. I mean, the mayor? The city's highest honor. I had no idea you were doing anything like this." "Because you never asked," I said, not with anger, but with the quiet truth of it. Tyler shifted uncomfortably. "We should have asked. We should have known." "Known what?" Richard's voice was strained. "Known that our daughter, who we thought was wasting her time and her education, was actually making the kind of difference in people's lives that politicians dream about? Known that she was building the exact kind of legacy we've always talked about, just not the way we expected?" The weight of his words settled over us. Legacy, the thing Richard valued above almost everything else, the thing he'd built his life and his business around, and somehow, without real estate deals or sales awards or business partnerships, I'd created something that would last, something that mattered, something that changed lives in ways that could never be measured in dollars or market value. "I'm sorry," Richard said, and the words seemed to cost him something. "Zoe, I'm sorry. What I said at dinner, calling you an embarrassment. God, I had it completely backward, didn't I? I looked down at the award, at my name etched in crystal, at the proof that someone understood the value of what I'd been doing all along. When I looked back up, my family was watching me with expressions I'd never seen before. Not disappointment, not embarrassment, something that looked almost like awe. I didn't do this work for recognition, I said. I did it because it needed to be done, and because I could do it. But I won't lie and say it doesn't feel good to have someone notice. Linda wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. We should have noticed first. We're your family. Yes, I said simply. You should have. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable this time. It was the kind of quiet that comes after a truth has been spoken, acknowledged, and accepted. We were still standing in the hallway, still processing what had just happened, still trying to understand how we'd gotten so many things so wrong. Tomorrow would bring more conversations, more apologies, more attempts to bridge the gap between who they thought I was and who I actually am. The award ceremony next Friday would be awkward and strange, watching my family try to celebrate something they'd dismissed for months. But tonight, in this moment, holding this crystal proof that my work mattered, I felt something I hadn't felt in the Hartwell house for a very long time. I felt proud of myself. And for the first time in my life, I didn't need anyone else's permission to feel that way. The week following Mayor Fleming's visit felt like living in an alternate reality. Monday morning, I woke up to find the Crystal Award sitting on my dresser, catching the early sunlight that streamed through my bedroom window. For a moment, I thought I might have dreamed the entire evening, but there it was, solid and real, with my name etched in elegant script. Downstairs, the atmosphere had shifted in ways I couldn't quite name. Linda was making breakfast when I entered the kitchen, something she rarely did on weekdays. Usually, we were all responsible for our own morning routines, grabbing coffee and toast before heading out to our respective obligations. But there she stood, scrambling eggs and brewing coffee in the good pot, the one usually reserved for Sunday dinners and holidays. "Good morning, sweetheart," she said, without looking up from the stove. The endearment felt different somehow, less automatic and more intentional. "Morning, Mom." I poured myself coffee from the carafe, noting that she'd made enough for several people, rather than her usual single cup. "I called the community center yesterday," she said, flipping the eggs with more focus than the task required. "I spoke to Eleanor Vance." My stomach tightened. "Oh?" She told me about the family literacy nights you organize, about the job interview workshops, about the partnerships you've built with local businesses. Linda turned to face me, spatula still in hand. "Zoe, why didn't you tell us you were essentially running your own program?" I sat down at the kitchen island, wrapping my hands around the warm coffee mug. How could I explain that I'd learned over the years to minimize my accomplishments because enthusiasm about things my family didn't understand was met with polite dismissal at best? "I did tell you I was working on literacy programs. You made it sound like you were helping with someone else's project, not creating and managing your own." She plated the eggs and set them in front of me. "Mrs. Vance said you've never missed a session in 8 months. Not once. Even when you had that terrible flu in March, you called each student personally to make sure they had materials to work on at home." The memory of that week came flooding back. I'd been running a fever of 102, but the thought of my students sitting in the community center waiting for me had been unbearable. Many of them had arranged their work schedules around our sessions, some taking unpaid time off because they valued the learning opportunity more than the lost wages. "They're counting on me," I said simply. Linda sat down across from me with her own plate. "That's what Mrs. Vance said." She told me about Miguel, the man who couldn't read his own medication labels until you worked with him. About Janet, who was too embarrassed to help her son with homework until you taught her the phonics she'd somehow missed in school. These were names I'd mentioned before, stories I'd tried to share during family dinners, but they'd never seemed to register. Now Linda was repeating them back to me like she was discovering them for the first time. "Mrs. Vance also said you've been using your own money to buy materials and snacks for the sessions." I shifted uncomfortably. "It's not much. Just workbooks and pencils, coffee and cookies. People learn better when they're comfortable." "How much, Zoe?" "Mom, it doesn't matter." How much of your library salary have you been spending on this program? I looked down at my eggs, estimating roughly in my head. Maybe 30%? Linda's fork clattered against her plate. 30%? Zoe, you're barely making minimum wage at the library. People were showing up hungry to evening sessions. Some of them were coming straight from double shifts. I couldn't watch someone try to learn on an empty stomach. The silence stretched between us, filled with the weight of all the conversations we'd never had, all the assumptions we'd both made. Finally, Linda spoke. Your father called Mrs. Vance, too. My head snapped up. Dad called the community center? He wanted to understand what you'd been doing. He said he needed to know exactly what kind of program his daughter had built, because he realized he'd been talking about something he knew nothing about. This was perhaps the most shocking development yet. Richard Hartwell didn't make phone calls to gather information unless he was considering a business investment or researching a competitor. The idea of him calling to understand my work felt surreal. What did she tell him? Linda smiled, and it reached her eyes in a way I hadn't seen directed at me in months. She told him that in 40 years of community work, she'd never seen anyone with your natural teaching ability. She said you have an added gift for making people believe they can succeed, even when they've failed at learning before. I felt heat rise in my cheeks. Mrs. Vance had never said anything like that to me directly. She also told him about the waiting list. Waiting list? Apparently, word has spread about your program. There are 63 people hoping to get into your next session, but the community center can only accommodate 20 at a time due to space limitations. I nearly choked on my coffee. 63 people? I'd known a few folks had asked friends to join, but I hadn't realized the interest had grown to that extent. Linda continued. Mrs. Vance said they'd been trying to figure out how to expand, but they'd need additional funding for a larger space, more materials, and potentially a paid coordinator position. The implications hit me slowly. A paid position. Managing an expanded program. The possibility of turning this volunteer work into an actual career, one that could support me financially while making the kind of difference I'd always wanted to make. Your father wants to talk to you about it, Linda said gently. Talk to me about what? About helping fund the expansion. About potentially sponsoring the program through the real estate company as a community outreach initiative. I stared at her, unable to process what she was saying. Richard, who had called my work embarrassing just days ago, wanted to fund its expansion? The front door opened and closed, followed by familiar footsteps in the hallway. Richard appeared in the kitchen doorway, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. He was dressed for work in his usual navy suit, but his tie was slightly crooked and his hair showed signs of anxious finger-combing. Good morning, he said, his voice carefully neutral. Morning, Dad. He poured himself coffee and sat down at the island, creating an awkward triangle of family members who weren't quite sure how to talk to each other anymore. I spoke with Mrs. Vance yesterday, he began. Mom told me. Richard nodded, stirring his coffee with unnecessary focus. She explained the scope of what you've been doing, the time commitment, the curriculum development, the individual attention you give each student. He looked up at me. Zoe, I owe you an apology that goes far beyond what I said Sunday night. I waited, not trusting myself to speak. I've spent 2 years thinking you were wasting your potential, drifting without purpose, avoiding real responsibility. But what you've been doing requires more skill, dedication, and genuine impact than anything I've accomplished in business. The admission seemed to cost him something. Richard Hartwell was not a man who acknowledged being wrong easily or often. Mrs. Vance said you've developed teaching methods that work for people who've struggled with traditional educational approaches, that you've somehow figured out how to reach adults who had given up on learning. That's not something you can teach or learn from a textbook. That's talent, Zoe. Real talent. I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. Thank you. I want to help, he said quickly, as if the words might change his mind if he didn't get them out fast enough. Hartwell Real Estate has been looking for meaningful community involvement opportunities. We've done the usual charity golf tournaments and scholarship funds, but nothing that creates direct, measurable impact on people's lives. He pulled out his phone and scrolled to what appeared to be notes he'd taken during his conversation with Mrs. Vance. She estimates that expanding your program to serve the full waiting list would require approximately $15,000 in startup costs. Larger space rental, additional materials, proper furniture, technology upgrades. Then about $8,000 annually to maintain operations. The numbers felt astronomical to me given that I'd been funding my small program with a few $100s a month from my library salary. That's a lot of money, Dad. It's a rounding error in our annual marketing budget, he said dismissively. Zoe, we spend more than that on newspaper ads every quarter, and I couldn't tell you a single life those ads have improved. Linda leaned forward. Your father also spoke with the mayor's office about the award ceremony Friday night. What about it? Richard cleared his throat. Apparently, there will be local media coverage. The newspaper wants to do a feature story about your program, and Channel 7 is planning to interview you for their community spotlight segment. My stomach dropped. Media coverage? The mayor's office considers this a significant story, Richard continued. Young woman creates innovative literacy program, transforms lives in her community, receives city's highest civilian honor. It's exactly the kind of positive news outlets are always looking for. The thought of being on television, of having my work scrutinized by the public was terrifying. I'd been comfortable operating in the shadows, helping people quietly without fanfare or attention. I don't know if I want that kind of publicity, I admitted. Zoe, Linda said gently, this could help you reach even more people. If the community knows about your program, imagine how many more students you could help. How many more lives you could change. She was right, but the idea still felt overwhelming. I'd spent so long being invisible, being the family member whose accomplishments didn't warrant discussion, that the prospect of suddenly being spotlighted felt like too dramatic a shift. There's something else, Richard said. I want to offer you a position. I looked up sharply. What kind of position? Director of Community Outreach for Hartwell Real Estate. Your job would be to oversee the literacy program expansion and develop other community education initiatives. Full salary, benefits, budget for program materials and operations. The offer hung in the air between us. A real job. Doing work I was passionate about. With financial stability and family support I'd never expected to receive. I don't know anything about working for a real estate company, I said. You wouldn't be working for a real estate company, Richard corrected. You'd be working for the community. Funded by the company. It's corporate social responsibility, but managed by someone who actually understands and cares about the work. I looked back and forth between my parents, trying to process this dramatic shift in how they viewed me and my work. Just days ago, I'd been an embarrassment. Now they were offering to fund and formalize everything I'd been doing on my own. Can I think about it? Quote. Of course, Richard said quickly. This is a big decision. Take all the time you need. But even as I said the words, I knew what my answer would be. The opportunity to help 63 people instead of 20, to create sustainable programming instead of scraping together resources each month, to turn my passion into my profession, was everything I'd dreamed of but never thought possible. Later that morning, I drove to the Pine Street Community Center for my regular Tuesday session with advanced students. The building was a converted warehouse with concrete floors and fluorescent lighting that flickered intermittently, but it had good acoustics and plenty of space for group work. I'd grown to love the echo of voices discussing passages, the scratch of pencils on paper, the quiet satisfaction of watching someone sound out a challenging word successfully. Mrs. Vance was waiting for me in the main classroom, along with someone I didn't recognize, a woman in her 30s with curly brown hair and a warm smile, dressed in jeans and a cardigan that had seen better days. Zoe, Mrs. Vance said, I'd like you to meet Carmen Rodriguez. She's been hoping to join your program. Carmen stepped forward and shook my hand firmly. Mrs. Vance told me there might be an opening in the next session. I've been waiting for 4 months. 4 months? I looked at Mrs. Vance in surprise. Carmen has been attending our basic math tutoring sessions while waiting for space in your reading program, Mrs. Vance explained. She's particularly motivated because she wants to help her daughter with homework and eventually pursue her GED. Carmen nodded enthusiastically. My daughter Sophia is 8 and she's already reading better than I am. I want to be able to keep up with her, you know? I don't want her to be embarrassed of her mama. The familiar ache of understanding hit me. The desire to be worthy of someone's pride instead of their embarrassment. The determination to prove that you're capable of more than others expect. We might have some good news soon about expanding the program, I told Carmen. Can I get your contact information? I'll call you as soon as we know more about additional sessions. Carmen's face lit up. Really? You mean I might not have to wait much longer? I hope not. After Carmen left, Mrs. Vance and I sat in the empty classroom preparing materials for the afternoon session. She was organizing workbooks while I reviewed individual progress notes for each student. Your father called me again this morning, she said without looking up from her stack of papers. Again? He wanted specifics about the expansion proposal, exact square footage requirements, utility costs, equipment needs. He's treating this like a serious business venture. I smiled despite myself. That sounded exactly like Richard, approaching community outreach with the same meticulous planning he'd use for a commercial real estate development. He also asked about your teaching background, Mrs. Vance continued. I told him you'd never had formal training, but that you have natural instincts I've rarely seen in professional educators. You didn't have to say that. Mrs. Vance looked at me seriously. Zoe, I've been running community programs for 4 decades. I've worked with volunteers, paid staff, certified teachers, and education professionals with advanced degrees. What you do in this classroom is special. The way you connect with people, the way you make them believe in themselves, the way you adapt your methods to what each individual needs. That's not something you can learn in college. I felt the familiar flush of pride mixed with disbelief. Compliments about my teaching still felt surreal after years of being told my work was meaningless. Your students have been asking about the award ceremony, Mrs. Vance added. Several of them want to attend to support you. They want to come to City Hall? Maria Santos called me yesterday. She said your students are planning to organize carpools so they can all be there Friday night. They want to celebrate the woman who believed in them when no one else did. The thought of Maria and the others dressed up for a formal ceremony, taking time off work, and arranging childcare just to cheer for me was almost overwhelming. These were people who'd been overlooked and undervalued by society, just as I'd been overlooked by my family. Now they wanted to show up for me the way I'd shown up for them. That means everything to me, I said quietly. It means everything to them too. You gave them more than reading skills, Zoe. You gave them dignity. That afternoon's session flew by in a blur of small victories and breakthrough moments. Janet successfully read a full page from her son's 3rd-grade textbook without stopping to sound out words. Miguel wrote his first complete paragraph about his experience immigrating to America. Sarah, the oldest student at 62, finished a workbook exercise independently for the first time. As I packed up materials at the end of the session, Miguel approached me with his characteristic shy smile. Miss Zoe, is it true what Mrs. Vance said? That you're getting an award from the city? Yes, Miguel, Friday evening at City Hall. His face broke into a wide grin. My whole family wants to come. My wife, my 3 kids, even my mother-in-law who never goes anywhere. We want to be there when they honor you. You don't have to do that. Yes, we do, he said firmly. Before I met you, I was ashamed that I couldn't read medicine bottles or my children's report cards. I felt stupid every day. Now I help my youngest daughter with her reading homework. Last week, I read a bedtime story to all 3 kids without stumbling over words. You didn't just teach me to read better. You taught me I'm not stupid. I hugged him impulsively. This quiet man who'd been so afraid to speak in our first session that he'd communicated mostly through nods and gestures. You were never stupid, Miguel. You just needed someone to teach you in a way that made sense to you. That's what I tell my kids now when they struggle with homework. Everyone learns different, but everyone can learn. You taught me that. Walking to my car after the session, I thought about Richard's job offer, about the possibility of expanding the program, about Friday night's ceremony. 6 months ago, I'd been living in my childhood bedroom, working part-time at the library, and feeling like a disappointment to everyone who mattered to me. Now I had a Crystal Award with my name on it, a job offer doing work I loved, and a classroom full of people who believed I'd changed their lives. The shift was so dramatic it felt like someone else's story. But it wasn't someone else's story. It was mine. I'd built it quietly, one student at a time, one session at a time, one small victory at a time. I'd created something meaningful without permission, without recognition, without support from the people whose opinions had always mattered most to me. And now those same people were offering to help me build something even bigger. The irony wasn't lost on me, but neither was the opportunity. Whether they discovered my worth because of external validation or genuine realization didn't matter as much as what we could accomplish together moving forward. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Richard's contact information. Before I could second-guess myself, I typed a quick message. I accept your job offer. Let's talk details tomorrow. His response came back within minutes. I'm proud of you, Zoe. I should have said that years ago. I stared at those words on my phone screen, sitting in my car in the parking lot of the community center, where I'd discovered what I was truly capable of. This morning, I'd woken up as the family disappointment who worked part-time at the library. Tonight, I was going to bed as the Director of Community Outreach for Hartwell Real Estate, with a program expansion to plan and 63 people counting on me to create something extraordinary. The transformation felt impossible and inevitable all at once, like a story that had been writing itself all along while I was too close to see the plot. Wednesday arrived with unseasonable warmth for October in Riverside Heights, the kind of crisp morning that made everything feel possible. I'd taken the day off from the library to meet with Richard about the community outreach position, and I found myself standing outside the Hartwell Real Estate building for the first time in years. The office occupied the ground floor of a restored brick building downtown, with large windows displaying property listings and awards the company had earned over the decades. Through the glass, I could see Richard's assistant Jennifer organizing files at her desk, and beyond her, the conference room where family business discussions had always excluded me. Taking a deep breath, I pushed through the front door. Jennifer looked up with a smile that seemed more genuine than the polite acknowledgement I usually received when accompanying my mother to company events. Zoe, congratulations on your award. Mr. Hartwell has been talking about nothing else since Monday. Thank you, Jennifer. Is he available? He's been waiting for you. Conference room 2. I walked through the familiar office space, past photos of successful sales and community involvement plaques, toward a meeting room I'd never been invited to enter. Richard stood when I knocked, gesturing for me to take a seat at the polished oak table where he'd spread out manila folders and legal pads covered in his precise handwriting. I've been doing research, he said without preamble, sliding a folder across the table. Adult literacy statistics, funding sources for educational nonprofits, successful community outreach models from other real estate companies. I opened the folder to find printed articles, spreadsheets, and what appeared to be a comprehensive analysis of literacy programs across the Pacific Northwest. The thoroughness was vintage Richard Hartwell, the same meticulous preparation he brought to major property acquisitions. According to the Department of Education, 43% of adults in Oregon read at or below basic levels, he continued. In our county specifically, that translates to approximately 8,000 people who struggle with tasks like reading medication labels, understanding job applications, or helping their children with homework. The numbers were staggering when presented in aggregate, even though I'd been working with individual cases for months. I also researched the economic impact of adult illiteracy, Richard said, flipping to another section of his notes. Lost productivity, increased healthcare costs due to medication errors, reduced employment opportunities, perpetuation of poverty cycles. The annual economic cost to our community is estimated at $12 million. $12 million? Conservative estimate. But here's what's interesting. He leaned forward, his business instincts fully engaged. Every adult who improves their literacy level from below basic to basic or higher typically sees an average income increase of $6,000 annually within 3 years. I could see where his mind was going, the way he was calculating return on investment for community programming the same way he'd analyze a commercial property development. Your current program serves 20 people at a time, with an average completion rate of 85%. Industry standard is 63%, so you're already outperforming established programs. If we expand to accommodate the full waiting list of 63 additional people and maintain your current success rate, we're looking at approximately 53 people annually achieving measurable literacy improvement. He pulled out a calculator and started running numbers with the focused intensity I remembered from my childhood, when he'd work late into the evening on complex deals. 53 people times $6,000 in average income increase equals $318,000 in additional annual earning power injected into our local economy. Over 5 years, that's nearly $1.6 million in economic impact. The transformation of my small volunteer program into economic projections felt surreal. But I understood what he was doing. Richard needed to justify community outreach spending in terms that made business sense, both to himself and to his partners. Those numbers assume we can maintain current quality while scaling up, I pointed out, which is why I want to structure this carefully. He pulled out another folder, this one containing what appeared to be job descriptions and organizational charts. I'm not proposing we turn your program into a factory. I'm proposing we give you the resources to do what you're already doing, but for more people. He slid a sheet of paper toward me. At the top, it read Director of Community Outreach, position description. Full-time salary equivalent to what our senior sales associates earn. Health insurance, retirement contributions, professional development budget. Your only responsibility would be managing and expanding the literacy program according to your vision, not ours. I scanned the job description, noting phrases like curriculum development autonomy and program methodology discretion. This wasn't Richard trying to corporatize my teaching approach. It was him trying to provide structure while preserving what made the program successful. There's one condition, he said, and my heart sank slightly. I want you to document everything. Hi, I'm Zoe. Last Sunday, my father looked me straight in the eye across our dining room table and said the words that still echo in my head. You're an embarrassment to this family, and frankly, we're tired of pretending otherwise. My mother nodded. My siblings stayed silent. 20 minutes later, Mayor Patricia Fleming was standing in our doorway, holding a crystal award with my name engraved on it. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The Sunday dinner tradition at the Hartwell house was sacred, or so my mother Linda always claimed. Every week at exactly 6:30, we'd gather around the mahogany table that had been in our family for 3 generations. The one that dominated our formal dining room with its pristine cream walls and carefully arranged family portraits. The chandelier cast a warm glow over the bone china that only came out for these occasions, and the smell of Linda's famous pot roast would fill the house from the moment you walked through the front door. But sacred traditions have a way of becoming prisons when you're the one person who doesn't quite fit the mold everyone else seems to slip into so effortlessly. I sat in my usual spot, the chair closest to the kitchen door, picking at my mashed potatoes while my sister Brooke regaled everyone with tales from her latest real estate conquest. At 26, she was already the top seller at Hartwell Real Estate, our father Richard's company that had been the cornerstone of our family's reputation in Riverside Heights for over 2 decades. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled in loose waves, her navy blazer still crisp despite it being Sunday evening, and her engagement ring caught the light every time she gestured. The Kowalski property closed for $50,000 over, asking, she announced, cutting her roast with surgical precision. I told them the market was hot, but even I didn't expect that kind of bidding war. Richard beamed with pride, his chest puffing out like a peacock. That's my girl. Natural-born saleswoman, just like her old man. My younger brother Tyler, 22 and fresh out of college with a business degree he'd used to eventually join the family company, raised his wine glass. To Brooke, future owner of half of Riverside Heights. Everyone laughed except me. Not because I wasn't proud of Brooke, but because these moments always felt like watching a movie where everyone knew their lines except me. I'd graduated with a degree in English literature 2 years ago, much to Richard's visible disappointment, and had been working part-time at the Riverside Public Library while trying to figure out my next move. In a family of natural-born entrepreneurs, I was the anomaly who preferred books to balance sheets. So Zoe, Linda said, her voice carrying that particular tone mothers use when they're about to spotlight the family member who's been too quiet. How are things at the library? Still checking out books and organizing shelves? The way she said it made my job sound like a hobby rather than actual work. I swallowed a bite of green beans and tried to keep my voice steady. It's going well. I'm actually working on some new programs to help with adult literacy in the community. Adult literacy? Richard scoffed, not bothering to look up from his plate. Honey, people who want to read learned how in elementary school. You can't force education on people who don't value it. That's not true, Dad. There are so many reasons why adults might struggle with reading. English as a second language. Learning disabilities that went undiagnosed. Poverty that meant they had to work instead of focus on school when they were younger. Zoe, Tyler interrupted with a patronizing smile. You always were the bleeding heart of the family. I felt heat rise in my cheeks but pressed on. I've been volunteering at the community center on Pine Street, and you'd be amazed at how grateful people are for just a little help. Last week, this woman named Maria finally read her first full novel in English. She was so proud she cried. That's nice, Linda said in the tone people use when they want to change the subject. But Richard wasn't ready to let it go. He set down his fork and leaned back in his chair, studying me with the same expression he used when evaluating a property that wasn't worth his time. Zoe, sweetheart, I'm going to be direct with you because that's what families do. Scared of failing. Scared of looking stupid in front of other people. Scared that I'll try really hard and still not be able to keep up with my daughter's homework. Her vulnerability was heartbreaking and familiar. Almost every student I'd worked with had expressed similar fears during our initial meetings. Carmen, can you tell me about a time when you learned something new successfully? Anything at all. She thought for a moment. When Sophia was born, I had to learn how to take care of a baby. I didn't know anything about babies, but I figured it out because I had to. What made you successful at learning baby care? I asked questions. I watched other mothers. I made mistakes and tried again. I didn't give up because Sophia needed me to get it right. I smiled. That's exactly how you'll approach reading improvement. You'll ask questions, watch how other students work through challenges, make mistakes and try again. And you won't give up, because Sophia needs you to succeed. Carmen's shoulders relaxed slightly. Is that really all there is to it? The methods aren't complicated. What makes students successful is the same thing that made you a good mother: persistence, willingness to ask for help, and remembering why the learning matters to you. We spent an hour going through sample materials and discussion techniques. Carmen was brighter than she gave herself credit for, asking thoughtful questions and making connections between reading strategies and real-world applications. When do you think the new program might start? She asked as we packed up materials. Soon, I hope. Maybe within the next month or two. Really? That fast? I thought about the church fellowship hall, about Richard's business plan, about the 63 people on Mrs. Vance's waiting list who were hoping for the same opportunity Carmen had been waiting for. Really? And Carmen? When it does start, I think you're going to surprise yourself with how capable you are. That evening, I had dinner with my college friend Ashley, who'd driven up from Eugene to celebrate my award and catch up on life developments. We met at a small Italian restaurant downtown, far enough from my family's usual haunts that I could speak freely about everything that had happened. So let me get this straight, Ashley said, twirling pasta around her fork. Your dad went from calling your work embarrassing to offering you a real job with benefits in the span of 4 days? That's the simplified version, but yes. And your mom, who used to change the subject every time you mentioned teaching, now wants to help plan the award ceremony reception? I nodded, still processing the rapid shift in family dynamics myself. Zoe, that's either the most dramatic attitude adjustment in parental history, or they're feeling incredibly guilty about how they treated you. Probably both, I admitted. But I don't think their motivation matters as much as the opportunity it creates. You're more forgiving than I would be, Ashley said. If my parents had dismissed my work for months and then suddenly wanted to fund it after external validation, I'd be pretty angry. I was angry. For about 24 hours, I was furious. But then I realized that being angry wouldn't help the 63 people on the waiting list. Being angry wouldn't get Carmen into a literacy program any faster or give Miguel's kids a better chance at academic success. Ashley studied my face. You've changed. How so? You used to need other people's approval so badly. You'd twist yourself into knots trying to make your family proud, trying to prove you belonged. But now you're talking about opportunities and impact instead of recognition and validation. She was right. Something fundamental had shifted in how I viewed my work and my worth. The award and Richard's job offer felt good, but they weren't the source of my confidence anymore. That had come from watching students succeed, from knowing I'd created something meaningful, from understanding that my impact was measurable and lives changed rather than opinions earned. I think I finally figured out the difference between working for approval and working for purpose, I said. And which feels better? Purpose, definitely purpose. Approval is nice when it comes, but it's not reliable. Purpose is something you can count on every day. We talked until the restaurant started stacking chairs and sweeping floors, catching up on years of friendship while processing the dramatic changes in my life. Ashley had always been my voice of reason during college, the friend who helped me see situations clearly when my emotions clouded my judgment. "Are you nervous about Friday night?" she asked as we paid the check. Terrified, I admitted. Public speaking has never been my strength, and knowing there will be media coverage makes it worse. What are you going to say in your acceptance speech? I'd been avoiding thinking about that, hoping I could just thank the mayor and sit down quickly. But Ashley's question made me realize I needed to prepare something meaningful. I don't know. Thank everyone who supported the program? Talk about the importance of adult education? Or, Ashley suggested, you could talk about what you've learned from your students, the stories that inspired you to keep going when the work was hard. That felt right. This award wasn't really about me. It was about recognizing the courage of people like Miguel and Maria and Carmen, who decided they deserved better futures and were willing to work for them. I think I'll tell Miguel's story, I said, about learning to help his children with homework, about discovering he wasn't stupid, just taught in the wrong way. Perfect. Focus on the transformation you've witnessed, not the transformation you've created. Let the audience understand that teaching literacy isn't about fixing people. It's about revealing capabilities that were always there. Friday morning dawned gray and drizzly, typical October weather that matched my nervous energy. I'd spent Thursday evening writing and rewriting my acceptance speech, practicing it in front of the mirror until the words felt natural. Linda knocked on my bedroom door while I was choosing between two dresses for the evening ceremony. "Come in." She entered carrying a jewelry box I recognized from my grandmother's estate. "I thought you might want to wear these tonight." Inside were my grandmother's pearl earrings and matching necklace, pieces I'd admired as a child but never been allowed to touch. "Mom, these are too valuable." "They belong to a woman who believed in the power of education to change lives," Linda said softly. "She would want you to wear them tonight." I lifted the necklace carefully, remembering my grandmother's stories about working as a rural school teacher in the 1960s, how she'd drive mountain roads in winter storms to reach one-room schoolhouses where she taught children whose parents couldn't read. "She would be proud of you," Linda continued. "She always said you had her teaching heart. I wish she could be there tonight. She will be. In every student whose life you've changed, in every person who learned to believe in themselves because you believed in them first." The ceremony was scheduled for 7 o'clock at City Hall, with a reception to follow. Richard had arranged for a photographer to document the evening, and Tyler was driving up from Portland where he'd been meeting with clients. Even Brooke had rearranged her schedule to attend, which surprised me more than anything else. My sister rarely compromised her professional commitments for family events, but she'd called Wednesday night to confirm she'd be there. "This is a big deal, Zoe," she'd said. "I want to be there when my sister gets honored by the city." My sister. Not when Zoe gets her award, or when the ceremony happens, but when my sister gets honored. The pride in her voice had been unmistakable. At 5:30, I was as ready as I'd ever be. The navy dress Linda had helped me choose was professional but not stuffy, and my grandmother's pearls added the perfect touch of elegance. My acceptance speech was folded in my purse, though I'd practiced it enough to deliver without notes if necessary. Richard appeared in the living room wearing his best suit, the one he reserved for major business presentations and formal occasions. "Ready?" he asked. "As ready as someone can be for their first public speaking appearance on television." He smiled. "Zoe, you've been public speaking for 8 months. Every time you teach a literacy class, you're communicating complex ideas to an audience who needs to understand them. Tonight is just a larger classroom." The simple reframe helped calm my nerves. He was right. Teaching was public speaking, just with smaller audiences and more personal stakes. "Let's go change some more lives," Richard said, opening the front door. As we walked toward the car, I caught sight of our reflection in the hallway mirror. For the first time in my adult life, I looked like I belonged in the Hartwell family photo. City Hall buzzed with activity when we arrived at 6:45. The main lobby had been decorated with banners celebrating community service, and a small crowd was already gathering near the auditorium entrance. I spotted several familiar faces from the community center, including Mrs. Vance, who waved enthusiastically when she saw us approaching. "Zoe!" Maria Santos appeared beside me, wearing a navy blue dress that brought out her warm brown eyes. Her husband Carlos stood behind her, looking slightly uncomfortable in what was clearly a borrowed suit, but smiling proudly. "We are so excited to be here for your special night. Maria, you didn't have to come. I know you both work early shifts." "Miss Zoe?" Carlos interjected in careful English. "You think we miss this? You think we not come when the city honors our teacher? No way. We tell our supervisor this is important family business." Behind them, I could see other students filing into the lobby. Miguel arrived with his entire extended family, including 3 children who looked scrubbed and polished for the occasion. Janet walked in with her teenage son, the same boy whose homework had once seemed impossible for her to help with. Even Sarah, my 62-year-old student who rarely ventured out in the evenings, had made the trip downtown. "How many of your students are here?" Richard asked, looking around in amazement. "I count at least 15 families," Linda replied. "Zoe, they organized carpools and childcare arrangements, just to celebrate with you." The sight was overwhelming. These were people who worked multiple jobs, who counted every dollar, who rarely had time for evening activities that weren't absolutely necessary. Yet here they were, dressed in their finest clothes, treating my award ceremony like the most important event on their calendars. Mayor Fleming approached our group, looking elegant in a charcoal gray suit and carrying a leather portfolio that I assumed contained ceremony notes. "Miss Hartwell, wonderful to see you again. Are you ready for your big moment?" "As ready as I'll ever be," I said, hoping my voice sounded more confident than I felt. "I've had the pleasure of meeting some of your students," the mayor continued, gesturing toward the growing crowd in the lobby. "They've been telling me remarkable stories about your teaching methods and the impact your program has had on their families." She leaned closer and lowered her voice. "Between you and me, Miguel Santos gave me a 20-minute explanation of how you taught him to break down complex words into manageable syllables. His enthusiasm was absolutely infectious. I couldn't help smiling at the image of Miguel cornering the mayor with phonics lessons. 8 months ago, he'd been too shy to speak above a whisper in our sessions. There's been a slight change to this evening's program," Mayor Fleming continued. "Channel 7 would like to interview you before the ceremony begins, and the Riverside Gazette wants to get some photos of you with your students for their front-page story." The media attention still felt surreal. "Front page? Community interest stories like this don't come along often," she explained. "Young woman creates innovative literacy program, transforms lives, receives city's highest civilian honor. It's exactly the kind of positive news our residents want to read about." A woman in a red blazer approached with a camera crew trailing behind her. I recognized her as Sandra Mitchell from Channel 7's evening news program. "Zoe Hartwell? I'm Sandra Mitchell. We're here to cover your award ceremony tonight. Could we have a few minutes for an interview before things get started?" My stomach clenched, but I nodded. This was part of using the platform to help more people, part of bringing attention to adult literacy needs in our community. "We'll set up right here in the lobby," Sandra said, directing her cameraman to position equipment near the community service banners. "The lighting is good, and we can get some background shots of your students and family." As the crew set up, I found myself surrounded by my literacy students who wanted to wish me luck and share their excitement about the evening. Carmen had arrived with her daughter Sophia, a bright-eyed 8-year-old who looked proud to be at such a grown-up event. "Miss Zoe," Sophia said in the direct way of children, "my mama says you're going to teach her to read better so she can help me with harder homework." "That's right, Sophia. Your mama is very smart and very determined. She's going to do great." Quote, Carmen squeezed my hand. "Thank you for making space for me in the program." Mrs. Vance called yesterday to confirm I can start in the first session when the new center opens. "You're going to love it, Carmen. And Sophia, you're going to be so proud of how much your mama learns." The camera crew finished their setup, and Sandra gestured for me to join her in front of the banners. The interview was surprisingly comfortable, mostly because Sandra had clearly done her research and asked thoughtful questions about adult literacy challenges, rather than generic questions about receiving an award. "What would you say to other young professionals who might be interested in community volunteer work but don't know where to start?" Sandra asked. "I'd say look for work that uses skills you already have, but in ways you might not have considered." I thought my English literature degree was impractical, until I realized it had given me tools for helping people unlock the power of written language. Whatever your background, there's probably a community need that matches your abilities. Your program has a waiting list of over 60 people. What does that tell us about literacy needs in our community? It tells us that there are many adults who want to improve their reading skills but haven't had access to appropriate resources. Traditional adult education programs often use methods designed for children, which can feel infantilizing or irrelevant to adult learners. Our approach treats students as capable adults who simply need different teaching strategies. After the interview, the photographer from the Riverside Gazette arranged group shots with my students and family. The contrast was striking. My parents and siblings in their business attire, standing beside families in their Sunday best. Everyone united by pride in what we'd accomplished together. "This one's going on the front page," the photographer said after capturing a shot of me surrounded by students, all of us laughing at something Miguel's youngest daughter had whispered. Perfect representation of community connection. At 7:15, we were ushered into the main auditorium. The space had been set up for about 200 people, with folding chairs arranged in neat rows facing a small stage. My family sat in the front row, with my students and their families filling several rows behind us. Mayor Fleming took the podium to open the ceremony, explaining the significance of the Outstanding Community Service Award and introducing the evening's program. 2 other community volunteers were being recognized for different types of service: a man who organized neighborhood cleanup events, and a woman who ran a food distribution program for seniors. I applauded enthusiastically for both recipients, genuinely impressed by their dedication to improving life in Riverside Heights. It felt good to be part of a group of people who'd found ways to make meaningful differences in their community. "Our final award recipient this evening," Mayor Fleming announced, "has created something truly special. In less than 1 year, Zoe Hartwell has developed and implemented an adult literacy program that has achieved remarkable success rates while serving some of our community's most underserved residents." She outlined the basic facts of my program, the number of students served, the partnerships I'd built with local businesses and the library. But then she shifted to something more personal. What makes Ms. Hartwell's work particularly noteworthy is not just what she's accomplished, but how she's accomplished it. This program was created entirely through volunteer effort, funded through personal resources, and developed without institutional support or formal recognition. I felt heat rise in my cheeks as the audience murmured appreciatively. Ms. Hartwell saw a need in her community and responded to it, not because anyone asked her to, not because it would advance her career, but because it was the right thing to do. That kind of selfless service exemplifies the very best of civic engagement. She invited me to join her on stage, and somehow my legs carried me up the steps without stumbling. The auditorium looked much larger from the podium, filled with faces turned toward me expectantly. "Zoe, before I present your award, would you like to share some thoughts about your work with adult literacy?" I pulled my speech notes from my pocket, but found myself looking out at my students instead of down at the paper. Miguel gave me an encouraging nod. Maria clasped her hands together like she was praying. Carmen sat with her arm around Sophia, both of them beaming. Thank you, Mayor Fleming, for this incredible honor. When I started volunteering at the Pine Street Community Center 8 months ago, I thought I was just helping a few people improve their reading skills. But what I discovered was something much more powerful. I folded the speech and spoke directly to the faces in front of me. I learned that when you help someone unlock their ability to read fluently, you're not just teaching a skill. You're giving them access to information that was previously closed to them. You're providing tools for helping their children succeed in school. You're opening doors to better employment opportunities and increased independence. The audience was completely quiet, focused on every word. But more than that, you're helping them discover capabilities they always had but didn't know how to access. Miguel Santos, who's here tonight with his family, once told me he thought he was too stupid to help his children with homework. Now he reads bedtime stories every night and helps his oldest daughter with her high school English assignments. I found Miguel in the crowd and saw him wiping his eyes. Maria Santos, who's also here tonight, wanted to advance in her career but felt held back by reading challenges that went back to her childhood in El Salvador. Last month, she passed the written exam to become a certified nurse's aide, a goal she'd been working toward for 3 years. Maria was crying openly now, her hand over her heart. These transformations didn't happen because I'm an exceptional teacher. They happened because Miguel and Maria and dozens of others like them had the courage to try again, to believe that learning was still possible for them, to invest time and energy in their own growth, even when it felt scary or difficult. I paused, looking around the auditorium at all the faces watching me. This award has my name on it, but it really belongs to every adult learner who decided they deserved a better future and was willing to work for it. It belongs to every family whose children will grow up watching their parents model the value of education and self-improvement. It belongs to our entire community, because when we invest in adult literacy, we're investing in stronger families, better prepared workers, and more engaged citizens. The applause started slowly, then built to sustained clapping that seemed to go on forever. Several people stood, then entire rows, until the whole auditorium was on their feet. Mayor Fleming presented the Crystal Award, heavier and more beautiful than I remembered from Sunday evening. As she placed it in my hands, she leaned close to whisper, "That was perfect. You spoke from the heart about what really matters." The ceremony concluded with reception time in the lobby, where people mingled over coffee and cookies while a jazz trio provided background music. I found myself at the center of countless conversations, with students introducing me to their family members, community leaders asking about the program expansion, and local business owners inquiring about partnership opportunities. "Miss Zoe," Sophia Santos tugged on my dress, "my mama wants to take a picture with you and her award." I looked around, confused. "Her award?" "The certificate I got today," Maria explained, pulling an official-looking document from her purse. "From the nursing program. I passed my final exam this afternoon. I wanted to wait until tonight, to celebrate, because you are the reason I was able to do it." The certificate was beautiful, proclaiming Maria Santos a certified nurse's aide with full credentials to work in healthcare facilities throughout the state. She'd been working toward this goal since before I met her, but the reading comprehension skills we'd worked on together had finally made the written exam manageable. "Maria, this is incredible. When do you start your new position?" "Monday morning, at Riverside Medical Center. Better hours, better pay, work that helps people. All because you helped me read good enough to pass the test." We took photos together, Maria holding her certificate while I held the City Award. 2 women celebrating different achievements that were fundamentally connected. Richard appeared beside us with his own camera. "Ladies, could I get a photo for the Hartwell Real Estate Community Outreach Portfolio?" As he snapped pictures, I realized this was the moment everything had been building toward. Not just the award ceremony or the media attention, but the convergence of personal growth, family recognition, and community impact that made all the previous struggles worthwhile. "Zoe," a voice called from across the lobby. I turned to see Dr. Ellen Morrison, the superintendent of Riverside Heights School District, approaching with a purposeful stride. Dr. Morrison, what a surprise. I've been following your literacy program with great interest, she said, shaking my hand firmly. We've been looking for innovative approaches to adult education in our district, and your success rates are remarkable. She handed me a business card. I'd love to discuss potential partnerships between your program and our adult basic education services. We have funding available for effective community programs, and I think there might be opportunities for collaboration. Another partnership opportunity, another chance to expand impact, another validation that the work mattered beyond my immediate community. Tyler joined our conversation, looking more animated than I'd seen him in years. Zoe, I've been talking to some of the students, family members. Do you realize that 5 children in this room are now getting homework help from parents who couldn't provide that support a year ago? 5 families where educational engagement has improved across generations because you helped the adults become better readers, Dr. Morrison added. That's a systemic change, Ms. Hartwell. That's exactly what effective community programming should accomplish. The evening continued with a steady stream of congratulations, business cards, and invitations to speak at other community events. Local organizations wanted to learn about replicating the program model. Parents asked about family literacy workshops. Even other municipalities expressed interest in developing similar initiatives. By 9:30, the crowd was finally thinning out. My students and their families began gathering their coats and preparing to leave, but not before a final round of hugs and promises to see each other at the expanded program sessions. Miss Zoe, Miguel said as his family prepared to go, thank you for tonight, but more, thank you for seeing something in me I did not see in myself. Miguel, you always had that capability. I just helped you find it. Maybe, he smiled. But sometimes people need someone else to believe first, before they can believe in themselves. As the Santos family walked toward the exit, I heard Miguel's oldest daughter asking her father about homework help for a science project. His confident response about research strategies and note-taking techniques would have been impossible 8 months ago. Carmen Rodriguez was among the last to leave, with Sophia already asleep in her arms. I'll see you next week when the new program starts, she whispered. You'll do great, Carmen. Trust yourself. I'm starting to, she replied, and I knew she meant it. Finally, only my family remained in the now quiet lobby. Linda was collecting programs and business cards I'd received throughout the evening, while Tyler and Brooke discussed transportation logistics for getting everyone home. Richard stood beside me, both of us looking around at the empty space that had been filled with celebration just hours before. How do you feel? He asked. Exhausted, grateful, overwhelmed, ready to get started on the next phase. Which is? I looked down at the Crystal Award in my hands, thinking about the church fellowship hall, the waiting list of students, the partnership opportunities that had presented themselves tonight, building something even better, something that reaches more people, serves more families, creates more opportunities for transformation. Richard nodded approvingly. Quote, that sounds like a plan worth investing in. As we gathered our things and prepared to leave City Hall, I caught sight of our reflection in the lobby windows. The Hartwell family, walking together toward the parking lot, carrying an award that represented recognition for work that mattered. For the first time in my adult life, I looked like I belonged exactly where I was. 3 months later, I stood in the doorway of the Riverside Adult Learning Center, watching the morning sunlight stream through the tall windows of what had once been a church fellowship hall. The space hummed with quiet activity as 42 students worked through reading exercises at tables scattered throughout the main room, their voices creating a gentle murmur of concentration and occasional breakthrough moments. The transformation of the building had exceeded even Richard's ambitious vision. The main hall accommodated 3 simultaneous literacy classes, each tailored to different skill levels and learning needs. The former kitchen had become a family resource center where parents could access educational materials for their children while attending their own classes. 2 smaller rooms served as quiet study spaces and individual tutoring areas. Mrs. Hartwell, Sophia Santos called out, running toward me with a worksheet in her hand. Over the past 3 months, she'd started calling me by my married name, a change that still made me smile every time. What do you have there, Sophia? It's my mama's homework. She finished it all by herself and wanted to show you before class starts. Maria appeared behind her daughter, looking proud, but trying to maintain the composure of someone who is still adjusting to academic success. The reading comprehension exercises are getting easier, she said. I can finish them without looking up every third word now. That's because your vocabulary has expanded significantly, I replied, reviewing her worksheet. Look at these complex sentences you're understanding now. 6 months ago, these would have been much more challenging. Maria beamed. My supervisor at the medical center said she wants to recommend me for the LPN program next year. Licensed practical nurse. Can you believe it? I could absolutely believe it. Maria's determination and quick learning had been evident from our first session, but watching her confidence grow had been one of the most rewarding aspects of my work. Have you talked to Dr. Morrison about the educational partnerships for LPN preparation? The school district has funding for students transitioning from basic literacy to vocational training. Yes, I meet with her next week. She said because I graduated from your program, I automatically qualify for the accelerated track. The success stories like Maria's had become routine rather than exceptional, which was perhaps the most gratifying development of all. What had once felt like miraculous transformations were now predictable outcomes of effective teaching methods and dedicated students. Carmen Rodriguez emerged from the intermediate classroom holding hands with a woman I didn't recognize. Zoe, I want you to meet my sister Rosa. She just moved here from Sacramento, and she wants to join the program. Rosa stepped forward shyly, reminding me of how Carmen had looked during our first meeting months earlier. Carmen tells me you help people learn to read better without making them feel stupid, Rosa said quietly. Everyone who comes here already knows how to read, I replied, using the standard introduction I'd developed for new students. We just work together to make reading faster, easier, and more enjoyable. It was a small distinction, but one that preserved dignity while acknowledging room for growth. After working with over 100 adult learners, I'd learned that how you framed the learning process was almost as important as the methods you used. Rosa can start in next Monday's beginner session, Carmen said excitedly. I told her about Family Literacy Night and how Sophia helps me practice at home now. The Family Literacy program had evolved into one of our most popular offerings. Parents and children worked side by side on age-appropriate materials, with parents modeling learning behaviors while children provided encouragement and celebration for small victories. The psychological impact of children seeing their parents as active learners had created positive educational dynamics in dozens of families. Rosa, I'll have Mrs. Vance get you registered this afternoon. Carmen can tell you about what to expect, but the most important thing to remember is that everyone here is working toward the same goal. We support each other. As they walked toward the registration area, I noticed Miguel Santos setting up materials in the advanced classroom. He'd completed the basic program 4 months ago, but had asked to stay on as a volunteer tutor for beginning students. His gentle patience and personal understanding of learning challenges had made him incredibly effective with new students who felt intimidated or embarrassed. Good morning, Miguel. How are you feeling about leading your first solo session today? Nervous but excited, he admitted. I keep thinking about how scared I was during my first class, and I want to make sure no one else feels that way. Miguel's transformation from hesitant student to confident teacher exemplified the ripple effects of effective adult education. He'd not only improved his own reading skills and helped his children academically, but was now passing those benefits on to other families in the community. You're gonna do great. Remember, you understand exactly what they're experiencing because you've been where they are. Miss Zoe, a voice called from across the room. Janet Williams approached with her teenage son Marcus, both of them carrying college brochures. Marcus got accepted to Portland State University, Janet announced proudly, with a partial academic scholarship. The news was wonderful, but not entirely surprising. Marcus had been an excellent student even when Janet couldn't help with homework. But over the past year, having a mother who could review his essays and discuss reading assignments had clearly enhanced his academic performance. Congratulations, Marcus. What will you be studying? Education, he said with a grin. I want to become a teacher. Maybe work with adult literacy programs like this one. Janet's eyes filled with tears. He says I inspired him by going back to learning as an adult. Can you believe that? I could absolutely believe it. Janet's determination to improve her reading skills so she could support Marcus's education had been one of the most motivating examples of parental sacrifice I'd witnessed. Her willingness to admit her limitations and work to overcome them had taught Marcus more about the value of education than any lecture could have accomplished. Marcus, if you're serious about adult education, I'd love to have you volunteer here during college breaks. We can always use helpers who understand both the academic side and the personal challenges. I'd love that. Mom talks about this place constantly. She says it changed our whole family. As they walked away discussing college preparation timelines, I reflected on how Janet's story illustrated the generational impact of adult literacy programs. Marcus would enter college better prepared because his mother had become a more effective educational support system. His future children would benefit from having two college-educated parents who valued learning and perseverance. Mrs. Vance appeared beside me with her daily report clipboard, a ritual we'd maintained as the program grew and formalized. 42 students in today's sessions with 12 more starting next week, she reported. We're operating at full capacity, with a waiting list of 28 people. 28? That's higher than last month. Word of mouth continues to be our best advertisement. Plus, the newspaper feature story brought in several new inquiries, and Dr. Morrison's partnership announcement has generated interest from other school districts. The media attention following the award ceremony had created both opportunities and challenges. Public recognition had brought additional students, volunteer offers, and partnership possibilities. But it had also increased expectations and scrutiny that sometimes felt overwhelming. Speaking of partnerships, Mrs. Vance continued, Richard called this morning about the Salem expansion proposal. The city council there approved funding for a pilot program based on our model. The prospect of replicating our approach in other communities was exciting, but also daunting. Success in Riverside Heights had emerged from specific local relationships, particular student needs, and gradual program development over months of trial and error. Translating that into a replicable model required careful documentation and training processes we were still developing. What did you tell him? That we'd need to hire and train additional staff before taking on expansion projects. We can't maintain quality if we grow too quickly. It was exactly the right response. The temptation to capitalize on recognition by expanding rapidly could easily undermine the careful, relationship-based approach that made our program effective. Has he found candidates for the staff positions? Quote, 3 applications for assistant teacher roles, all with relevant experience, plus 2 people interested in family program coordination. The hiring process represented another new challenge. Finding people who combined teaching skills with the patience and cultural sensitivity needed for adult literacy work wasn't as simple as posting job descriptions. We needed team members who understood that effective adult education was as much about restoring confidence as developing skills. Around 10:30, I walked through each classroom to observe sessions and check on student progress. The beginner group was working on phonics patterns, with Miguel demonstrating sound combinations while students practiced with partners. His calm encouragement and personal understanding of learning struggles created a supportive atmosphere that put everyone at ease. The intermediate class was discussing a news article about local economic development, using current events as a basis for vocabulary building and reading comprehension. Students took turns reading paragraphs aloud, with others offering assistance when someone encountered unfamiliar words. The advanced group was working on essay writing, preparing for GED exams or college placement tests. The conversations in this room focused on thesis development, supporting evidence, and persuasive language techniques that would serve students well in academic or professional contexts. In each classroom, I saw evidence of the teaching philosophy we'd developed through experience rather than textbooks. Adult learners succeeded when they felt respected, when materials connected to their real-life goals, and when they could support each other through shared challenges and victories. Zoe, Dr. Morrison called as I finished my classroom rounds. Do you have a few minutes to discuss the State Education Department proposal? We walked to my small office, a converted storage room that contained a desk, filing cabinet, and bulletin board covered with student success photos and thank you letters. The Department of Education wants to feature our program in their annual report on innovative adult learning initiatives, Dr. Morrison explained. They're also interested in providing additional funding for research and documentation that could support statewide implementation. How much additional funding? Potentially significant. Enough to hire a full-time research coordinator, document all our teaching methods and materials, and create training modules for other communities. The opportunity was tremendous, but it also represented a fundamental shift in our program's identity. We'd grown organically from volunteer work to community initiative to small nonprofit organization. Becoming a state-level demonstration program would bring resources and recognition, but also bureaucratic requirements and performance expectations that might change the intimate, relationship-focused culture we'd carefully cultivated. What would be required from us? Detailed outcome tracking, standardized assessment protocols, regular reporting on student progress and program effectiveness. Essentially proving that what you do here can be systematically replicated elsewhere. I thought about Miguel's gentle patience with struggling students, Maria's tears of joy when she passed her nursing exam, Carmen's determination to keep up with her daughter's homework. Could those transformations be reduced to data points and assessment scores? Dr. Morrison, I appreciate the opportunity, but I need to think carefully about whether state-level programming aligns with our mission here. Of course. Take all the time you need. But Zoe, consider the potential impact. If your methods can be successfully implemented in even 10 other communities across Oregon, you'd be helping hundreds of additional families. She was right about the potential for broader impact, but I'd learned to be cautious about growth that prioritized quantity over quality. Our success in Riverside Heights had come from deep relationships, individual attention, and flexibility to adapt methods based on specific student needs. After Dr. Morrison left, I sat in my office reviewing student files and thinking about the decisions ahead. In 18 months, I'd gone from part-time library worker living in my childhood bedroom to director of a recognized adult education program with expansion opportunities across the state. The transformation felt simultaneously natural and surreal. A knock on my door interrupted my thoughts. Tyler stood in the hallway, looking slightly out of place in his business suit among students in casual clothes heading to afternoon sessions. "Tyler, what are you doing here?" "I wanted to see the program in action," he said, "and to talk to you about something." We walked through the main hall, where afternoon students were beginning to arrive for their sessions. Tyler watched quietly as people greeted each other warmly, shared updates about their week, and settled into study groups with the easy familiarity of a close-knit community. "This feels different from what I expected," he said. "Different how?" "More like a family gathering than a classroom. Everyone seems genuinely happy to be here. Adult learners succeed when they feel welcomed rather than judged. Most of our students have had negative educational experiences in the past, so creating a supportive environment is essential." Tyler nodded, observing a group of women helping each other with pronunciation exercises, while their children played quietly in the corner with educational toys. "Zoe, I've been thinking about our conversation after the awards ceremony. About meaningful work and making a difference beyond profit margins." I waited, curious about where this was leading. "I want to leave the real estate company." The announcement was unexpected. Tyler had seemed destined for the family business since childhood, and Richard had been grooming him to eventually take over operations. "What would you do instead?" "I'd like to work with adult education programs. Maybe get a master's degree in community development or educational policy. Use my business background to help organizations like this one become financially sustainable and scalable." The idea had merit. Adult literacy programs across the country struggled with funding inconsistencies and operational challenges that business expertise could help address. Tyler's analytical skills and understanding of organizational development could be valuable assets for educational nonprofits. "Have you talked to Dad about this?" "That's actually why I'm here. I wanted to understand your work better before having that conversation. I figured if I'm going to disappoint him by leaving the family business, I should at least be able to articulate what I want to do instead." I smiled at his assumption that Richard would be disappointed. 6 months ago, that might have been true. But witnessing the impact of meaningful community work had changed Richard's perspective on what constituted success and legacy. Tyler, I think you might be surprised by his reaction. Dad has become one of the strongest advocates for community-focused work I know. Really? He talks constantly about the economic impact of adult literacy programs, the return on investment of educational initiatives, the business case for corporate social responsibility. He's found ways to value this work using the metrics that matter to him. Tyler looked relieved. So you don't think he'd see it as abandoning family expectations? I think he'd see it as extending family values into a different arena. The Hartwell commitment to community development and long-term thinking just applied to education instead of real estate. We spent another hour walking through the facility while I explained program components, student outcomes, and operational challenges. Tyler asked thoughtful questions about funding sources, partnership structures, and scalability issues that demonstrated both genuine interest and relevant analytical skills. This could work, he said as we concluded the tour. Adult education organizations need people who understand business development, strategic planning, and financial management. Most nonprofits are run by people with education backgrounds who struggle with operational sustainability. And most business people don't understand the relationship building and individual attention that make educational programs effective. I added, someone with both perspectives could be incredibly valuable. As Tyler prepared to leave, he paused at the main entrance and looked back at the busy learning center. Zoe, I owe you an apology. For what? For years of dismissing what you were trying to do. For treating your interests like hobbies instead of recognizing them as professional aspirations. For not seeing that you were building something important. The apology felt genuine and long overdue, but also unnecessary at this point. Tyler's changed perspective mattered more than past misunderstandings. You weren't alone in that, I replied. Quote, it took external validation for any of us to fully recognize what was happening here. But you kept working even when we didn't understand or support it. That takes a kind of strength I'm not sure I would have had. That evening, I had dinner with my parents at their house for the first time since the award ceremony. The atmosphere felt different from our previous family gatherings, less tense and more genuinely interested in each other's lives and work. Tyler told us about his conversation with you today, Linda said as we sat down to eat. About wanting to work in educational nonprofits. What do you think about that? I asked. Richard considered his response carefully. 6 months ago, I would have been devastated. I'd built this business expecting both my children to eventually take it over, to continue the Hartwell legacy in real estate. And now I think the Hartwell legacy might be broader than I originally envisioned. You've shown me that meaningful work doesn't have to fit traditional definitions of success. If Tyler can use his skills to help educational organizations become more effective and sustainable, that's absolutely worthwhile. Linda nodded in agreement. We're proud of both of you for finding work that makes a real difference in people's lives. The conversation continued with updates on program expansion, Tyler's graduate school research, and Brooke's latest real estate projects. For the first time in my adult life, family dinner felt like a gathering of equals, rather than a performance evaluation, where I consistently fell short of expectations. Later that week, I received a phone call that crystallized many of the decisions I'd been weighing about program growth and state-level opportunities. Miss Zoe? This is Rosa Martinez, Carmen's sister. Rosa, how are your classes going? Really good. That's actually why I'm calling. I wanted to tell you that my son Diego got accepted to community college. He's going to study automotive technology. Diego was Rosa's 19-year-old who had dropped out of high school when his reading difficulties made academic success seem impossible. Over the past 2 months, as Rosa improved her own literacy skills, she'd been able to help Diego with reading comprehension in ways she'd never been capable of before. That's wonderful news, Rosa. Diego must be excited. He is, but Miss Zoe, that's not the most important part. Diego told me yesterday that watching me learn to read better made him believe he could learn too. He said if his mama could go back to school at 42, he could definitely handle college at 19. The story exemplified everything I valued most about adult literacy work. Rosa's decision to improve her reading skills had not only enhanced her own life opportunities, but had inspired her teenage son to re-engage with education and pursue vocational training that could provide long-term career stability. Rosa, thank you for sharing that with me. Stories like yours remind me why this work matters so much. Miss Zoe, there's one more thing. My church in Sacramento heard about your program, and they want to know if you can help them start something similar. There are a lot of families there who need what you do here. After ending the call, I sat in my office thinking about Rosa's request, Dr. Morrison's state funding proposal, Tyler's career transition plans, and the constant stream of communities asking for program replication assistance. The path forward was becoming clearer. Rather than accepting state funding that might bureaucratize our approach, we could develop a training and consultation model that helped other communities create their own relationship-based adult literacy programs. Tyler's business expertise could help establish sustainable funding and operational frameworks, while I focused on pedagogy and program quality. 6 months later, I stood in a similar converted church fellowship hall in Salem, Oregon, watching their newly trained volunteer teachers work with their first group of adult literacy students. The space buzzed with the same quiet energy I recognized from our Riverside Heights center, but adapted to local community needs and cultural contexts. How does it feel to see your program model working in another community? Asked Jennifer Chen, the Salem program coordinator who had completed our month-long training intensive. It feels like watching your children succeed independently, I replied. Same core principles, but implemented in ways that fit your specific community. The Salem program served a different demographic than ours, with more Spanish-speaking immigrants and fewer families with school-age children. But the fundamental approach of treating adult learners with dignity, connecting literacy skills to real-life goals, and creating supportive peer relationships had translated effectively. The waiting list here is already 37 people, Jennifer reported. Word spreads quickly when people see their neighbors succeeding. Over the past year, Tyler had completed his master's degree in nonprofit management while working part-time with our organization. His thesis project had been a comprehensive analysis of adult literacy program sustainability, which had become a resource manual for communities wanting to establish similar initiatives. Tyler called this morning, Jennifer continued. He said inquiries are coming in from 12 different cities across Oregon and Washington. The demand for this kind of programming is much higher than anyone anticipated. The success was gratifying but also overwhelming. Each community that wanted to replicate our work represented hundreds of potential students who could benefit from effective adult literacy programming. But each also required careful training, ongoing support, and quality oversight to maintain the relationship-based approach that made our methods successful. My phone buzzed with a text message from Maria Santos, who was now 6 months into the licensed practical nurse program and maintaining a 3.7 GPA. Miss Zoe, I got promoted to charge nurse at the medical center. Thank you for helping me believe I could do more than I thought possible. Messages like Maria's had become routine, but they never lost their emotional impact. Every success story represented a life transformed, a family strengthened, a community improved. The ripple effects continued expanding in ways I could never have imagined when I first volunteered at the Pine Street Community Center. That evening, I returned to Riverside Heights and walked through our original learning center. The Friday evening family literacy session was in progress, with parents and children working side by side on reading activities, while volunteers provided individual assistance where needed. Carmen Rodriguez was helping her daughter Sophia with a book report while simultaneously reviewing her own college preparation materials. She'd decided to pursue an associate's degree in early childhood education, inspired by her positive learning experiences and desire to help other families navigate educational challenges. Miguel Santos was leading a discussion group about current events, using newspaper articles to help students practice reading comprehension while staying informed about local issues. His confidence as a teacher had grown tremendously, and several students had specifically requested to work with him because of his patient, encouraging approach. Mrs. Vance found me observing the evening session from the main hall doorway. "Feeling nostalgic?" she asked. "Feeling grateful," I replied. 18 months ago, I was volunteering here one evening a week, hoping to help a few people improve their reading skills. Now we're operating programs in 4 different communities, training teachers across 2 states, and serving over 200 students annually. What's next? I thought about the question seriously. The opportunities for continued expansion were limitless. But so were the risks of growing too quickly, or losing the intimate, relationship-focused culture that made our approach effective. Next is making sure we never lose sight of why we do this work. It's not about program statistics or funding levels or media recognition. It's about Miguel reading bedtime stories to his children. It's about Maria advancing her nursing career. It's about Rosa inspiring her son to return to education. Mrs. Vance nodded approvingly. That's why this program works, Zoe. You never forgot that literacy education is ultimately about human dignity and individual potential. As I prepared to leave that evening, Sofia Santos ran up to me with a drawing she'd created during the children's activity time. "This is for you, Mrs. Hartwell," she said, handing me a colorful picture of stick figures standing in front of what appeared to be our learning center building. "Tell me about your drawing, Sophia." "This is my mama," she pointed to one figure, "and this is me, and this is you. We're all together at school because you helped my mama learn to read better so she can help me with harder homework." I knelt down to Sophia's level, studying her artistic representation of our literacy program's impact. "Sophia, did you know that helping your mama learn has been one of the best parts of my job?" "Really?" "Really. Seeing families succeed together, like you and your mama, reminds me every day that education is about more than just reading words on a page. It's about building better futures." Sophia beamed and hugged me tightly before running back to join her mother, who was gathering materials to take home for weekend practice. Walking to my car, I reflected on the journey from family disappointment to community leader, from part-time library worker to director of a regional adult literacy initiative. The transformation had required persistence through periods when no one understood or valued my work, courage to continue despite lack of support, and wisdom to recognize opportunities for meaningful impact. But perhaps most importantly, it had required learning to measure success by the lives changed rather than recognition received, by the students empowered rather than awards earned, by the communities strengthened rather than personal advancement achieved. The Crystal Award from the city still sat on my office desk, but it had been joined by dozens of thank you letters, graduation photos, and drawings from students, children. The collection told the real story of meaningful work, one relationship and one transformation at a time. As I drove through downtown Riverside Heights, I passed the original Pine Street Community Center where everything had started. The building looked the same, but my perspective on what was possible had changed completely. What had begun as volunteer work to fill empty hours had become a career, a calling, and a model for community-based adult education that was spreading across the Pacific Northwest. Most importantly, it had become proof that you don't need anyone else's permission to build something meaningful. You just need to see a need, believe you can help meet it, and persist through the inevitable periods when no one else understands what you're trying to accomplish. The phone rang as I pulled into my driveway. Tyler's name appeared on the screen. "Zoe, I just got off a call with a school district in Eugene. They want to partner with us to establish 3 new adult literacy centers, with full funding for the first 2 years and potential for long-term sustainability." 3 centers? 1 for Spanish-speaking immigrants, 1 focused on job skills integration, and 1 specifically for parents who want to help their children succeed academically. The opportunity represented everything we'd been working toward: comprehensive programming that addressed different community needs, sustainable funding that could support quality implementation, and scale that could impact hundreds of additional families. "What did you tell them?" "I told them we'd send a team to assess their community needs and develop an implementation plan. But Zoe, we'll need to hire at least 6 additional staff members and establish training protocols for local volunteers. Can we maintain program quality with that level of expansion?" "I think so if we're careful about hiring and training. Plus, Eugene is only 2 hours away, so we can provide ongoing support more easily than some of our other locations." After ending the call, I sat in my car for a few minutes, watching lights come on in houses throughout my neighborhood. Behind many of those windows, parents were helping children with homework, reading bedtime stories, or discussing school events over dinner. Some of those families had been touched by our literacy program. Others represented communities we might serve in the future. The work was far from finished. Adult literacy needs existed in every community, affecting thousands of families who deserved access to effective, dignified educational opportunities. But the foundation was solid, the model was proven, and the team was expanding to meet growing demand. Most importantly, I'd learned that meaningful work creates its own momentum. When you focus on serving others rather than advancing yourself, opportunities emerge that you could never have planned or predicted. Success becomes defined not by external recognition, but by internal satisfaction, not by personal achievement, but by community impact. The young woman who had sat at family dinners feeling invisible and undervalued had discovered that her greatest strength was helping others become visible and valued. The daughter who had once been called an embarrassment had built something her entire family was proud to support and extend. Tonight I'd go to bed knowing that tomorrow would bring new students, new challenges, and new opportunities to make a difference in people's lives. It was more than I could have hoped for, and exactly what I'd been meant to do all along. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.